Okay, so picture this. A husband forgets an anniversary, or maybe he just completely zones out during an important conversation, and his wife? She just explodes. The reaction seems way, way out of proportion to the mistake, right? We've all seen some version of this play out. But is it just a bad day? Or could there be a much darker, more complex psychological game being played? Let's dive in and unpack what the research says about this.
And that, right there, is the big question we're digging into. Is this kind of thing just a series of innocent, forgetful moments? Or, as our source material suggests, could it actually be part of a calculated, manipulative pattern? One that's designed to maintain power and control in a relationship.
So let's be super clear about what we're talking about. We're not focused on the stuff in that left column, the occasional slip-up, the honest mistake that ends with a sincere apology. Nope, this explainer is zeroing in on the column on the right, a chronic, repeated pattern of ignoring a partner's emotional needs, which almost always escalates into serious conflict. All right, so let's really unpack this neglect pattern itself. Because from a dark psychology perspective, this isn't just about being busy or stressed out. It's about reframing that chronic carelessness as a potential weapon, a tool for control. Now, what's really important here is how chronic neglect is defined. See, it's not about one-off actions like forgetting to take out the trash. It's about a consistent failure to show up for a partner's emotional needs. And the research shows that is way, way more damaging in the long run. And this is where things get, well, pretty dark. The source material actually connects this pattern of neglect to some very serious personality traits, known together as the dark triad. The idea here is that for some people, neglect isn't an accident at all. It's a strategy, a way to manipulate, to assert dominance, and to keep their partner constantly feeling off balance. And that leads us to this really sneaky but powerful form of manipulation, gaslighting by omission. Now, this isn't like the classic gaslighting where someone is actively lying to your face. This is all about what isn't done or what isn't said. It's a silent weapon that, over time, can make the person on the receiving end question their own worth and even their own sanity. To see how this plays out in real life, the source gives us the example of Sarah and Tom. Tom keeps forgetting important things, like picking up the kids or showing up for date night. Now, each incident might seem small, but over time, it sends a powerful message to Sarah. Her needs, their plans, and by extension, she herself, just aren't a priority. And get this isn't just all in her head. There's actual science to back this up. According to studies, our brains don't make a huge distinction between the pain of being rejected or ignored and actual physical pain. So that explosive reaction, it's not just drama. It's the brain's alarm system, the amygdala, literally screaming that it's under threat. Okay, so we've seen the neglect. Now, let's flip the coin and look at that explosive reaction. Is it a desperate survival mechanism, or does it risk becoming a form of self-sabotage that just keeps the toxic cycle going? This brings us to a really important concept called reactive abuse. It describes that exact moment when a person who has been pushed and neglected for so long finally snaps. And their reaction can be so intense, so over the top, that it actually blurs the lines, making it really hard for an outsider to tell who the initial aggressor even was. You can see how this becomes a vicious cycle, right? It's a feedback loop from hell, basically. First, the act of neglect happens. That triggers a threat response in your brain, a feeling of abandonment and pain. Then comes the reaction, which can sometimes be manipulative itself. And what's the result? The conflict gets even bigger, which just reinforces the whole pattern. You know that saying, if you lie down with dogs, you get fleas? Well, an expert cited in the source, Dr. Ramani Durvasula, uses that exact idea to explain this. She says that when you're in a long-term dynamic with someone who uses manipulative tactics, you might start to pick up some of those same toxic traits, not because you're a bad person, but simply as a way to defend yourself. And when this gets really, really toxic, it can morph into something called dark empathy. This is when you know your partner's deepest insecurities and vulnerabilities so well that you can use them as a weapon. For example, the source talks about a wife who knows her husband is deeply insecure about money, so she deliberately overspends just to punish him. It's weaponizing intimacy. So what's the why behind all of this? And what are the real-world consequences? Well, the stakes are incredibly high, as we're about to see. This is where we get into the hidden motives and the devastating fallout. According to this source material, it really boils down to two main motivations.
On one hand, it could be about avoidance, a deep, maybe even subconscious fear of intimacy. The neglect creates distance, which feels safe. But on the other hand, it can be a cold, calculated power play, a way to constantly test boundaries and keep a partner feeling insecure.
And if you're wondering just how high the stakes are, well, take a look at this number: 70%. According to relationship studies cited in the source, the divorce rate in relationships defined by this kind of chronic neglect can be as high as 70%. This isn't just a small problem. It is a proven relationship killer. And it's not just the relationship that suffers. The personal cost is absolutely devastating. An American Psychological Association study found significantly higher rates of both depression and anxiety among women in these kinds of marriages. You can see right here the profound and damaging impact this dynamic has on a person's mental health. All right, so when you piece everything together, the husband's neglect, the wife's reaction, all those hidden motives, you get what the source material calls a dance of destruction. And this is how that dance works. It's this tragic push and pull. He neglects his partner to avoid feeling vulnerable. She reacts with this huge emotional explosion to try and force a connection. And the result? They end up in this shared, distorted reality, a kind of shared delusion where neither person's real needs are ever truly met. Which leaves us with one final, really thought-provoking question. In this toxic dance, where one person's move perfectly triggers the other's countermove, is anyone really leading? Or are they both just trapped, following steps in a pattern they can't seem to break? It's a complex dynamic, for sure, with no easy answers.